Hello and welcome to episode 5 of It's All Plastic. Plastics are the most common form of waste in our oceans. It comprises nearly 80% of all the marine pollution. While the situation may be serious, it's not without hope. The global movement to tackle plastic pollution is a brilliant opportunity for the world to come together as one community and find a solution to a problem that goes beyond borders, genders, race, etc. To discuss this in detail, we're in conversation with an environmentalist, entrepreneur, and someone who's been at the forefront of the sustainability movement for years now. Joel Michael, who's the founder of Oceans and Us. Thank you so much, Joel, for taking out time and speaking to me today.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Navya.
Joel, when we talk about plastics in oceans, a new report every day brings a new concern to light. Some reports suggest that marine plastic pollution could nearly triple by 2040 if it is left unchecked. And some reports say that there will be more plastic than fish in the sea in the coming few years. How would you describe the plastic problem in today's time?
I have a slightly different take on it, Navya. I think plastic necessarily isn't a problem. And I know that's very contradictory to what we see in the media today, but I think the major problem is single-use plastic. And I think plastic, honestly, is a brilliant material. It was a great innovation, just wasn't seen through in the start to the end entirely. I think it's durable, it's cheap, and it's effective. I think we're all surrounded by plastics, and most of what we use on a day-to-day basis is plastic. And you're very young, but I think back in my day, we got a lot of beverages in glass bottles. So, we had it figured at that time where, stuff was in a glass bottle, you went and you returned it and you got a deposit back and things just moved in a circular system. And then obviously there was this transition to plastics thereafter for business economic sense, which again comes from plastic being more durable, plastic being cheaper, more effective. Glass bottles break and shattered and plastic bottles didn't. So I don't think it's an all evil necessarily. I think if there is a true way of creating circularity around plastics and companies who produce plastic as a major component of their business start to think about what is the afterlife of this product, I think it would change the narrative. And to answer your question on the statistics, yes, there is a lot of plastics that are in the oceans. And that again goes because of a lack of awareness where we left a lot of this process unchecked. Marketing couple of decades ago was all about single use, and you don't have to wash your dishes anymore, and you don't have to contemplate how you consume and dispose certain items. You can just use and throw, and it comes from the world of fast fashion and fast consumption, and that was sort of why a lot of this was left unchecked and is now entering the oceans and the fish, and then inevitably back into us. And we've seen researchers have found microplastics in human blood, in breast milk, and we consume plastic, we inhale plastic inevitably.
Right. Joel, News with Navya has talked about some brilliant innovations from across the world that are helping clean up oceans, repurpose the waste that is collected into interesting products, and also support coastal communities at the same time. I want to understand what are some of the innovative solutions or technologies that Oceans and Us is providing to combat marine plastic waste, and how did this entire journey begin?
Well, so I was watching a documentary called Seaspiracy, when I think most of you have watched it, and that's when it sort of struck a nerve, and I felt I should be doing something. This area of oceans, there's a lack of communication or focus around this subject, and surprisingly, 70% of the planet is oceans and water, just as the human body is. And there's a direct synergy and a link between this, telling us that, we can't really leave this unattended or unchecked. And while a lot of people today are all into planting trees because they assume trees are the solution to carbon sequestration, oceans are the reason we're breathing oxygen right now. They sequestrate a lot of the carbon. It's the major carbon sink, and that's where we get clean oxygen from. My only concern with this was that a lot of them, I'd say 90% of them, are fostering this innovation as a not-for-profit. And that's great, and more power to them. And I would gladly support that in any way that I can. But I just think, given the current climate crisis, it's not scalable as a not-for-profit. If I need to be doing good at the impact that's required, and if I need to knock on someone's door and ask for money to be able to do it, I just don't think it's going to happen at the pace that we need to be addressing this. We decided that the best way to do this at scale is to operate as a network orchestrator. We felt that there is no need to reinvent the wheel, because this is the one industry that doesn't require competition. You need to come and work collaboratively, because no one company can solve climate change. The best way to do this is to work together. We decided that the problem was around collection or removal, which is the problem of removing this from the oceans and the rivers. So we are currently working on developing a fully autonomous unmanned AI boat that we will be deploying in the oceans. And that is going to automatically collect all kinds of waste, segregate the plastics from the other materials, and then we're going to bring this back to the land and collaborate with different waste management facilities, different innovations such as the ones that you've spoken of, who are going to take this and either segregate it and further recycle it to a point where new material can be created, or some of them are going to take this and put it back into their ecosystem. So, for example, Coca-Cola already has a program where they take back used Coca-Cola bottles. So it's the full product that they take back. For example, we're building bricks that are going to be made completely from ocean-bound plastic. These bricks can be they are about 2.5 times stronger than the regular red brick. It's certified as a safe construction material. So we're working with several governments like Tanzania, Kenya, Ghana, etc., including India that we're talking to right now.
Oceans and Us is creating a circular economy around waste, as you said, using Web3. Can you explain how Web3 is helpful in fighting ocean plastic?
We were going to go the traditional route, and we were going to go and raise investment and secure capital and go and build what we were doing with the boats. Then we soon realized that if we raised money from a particular individual early stage, and let's say it was the capital was more focused on the geography where it came from, it made a very big difference on where the boats could be deployed. For example, if the money came from Russia, or from China, or from any certain geography, I know that certain countries would be skeptical to have a boat with that kind of investment in their respective waters, even though the intent would have been purely for impact. And there's at the end of the day, we are going to gather a lot of data. We're going to have a lot of data around which brand and which bottle is in the River Nile versus which is in the Ganga. So we're going to know exactly, whether it's Pepsi or Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew or Bisleri, for example. So we're going to know what brand contributes in which kind of areas, and we're going to be able to speak to these brands to try and join us in making a difference. But in saying so, we wanted to make sure that this data isn't something that we try to keep or hide and monetize secretly. We wanted to open it up to the public, and we wanted to make sure that it's transparent. And our major focus for being a Web3 based platform was to create traceability. When people participate as an initiative of buying a token with us or an NFT with us, all of a sudden you have a crowd rather than an individual that's participating in our initiative. A crowd has no race, religion, geography. A crowd is a crowd, and it's a movement. That's why it's Oceans and Us, which is a community. So that changes the narrative of skepticism around where the money is coming from. If you have a bottle in your hand or a piece of packaging in your hand, you look for a bin that have the 3 arrows for recycling, and you assume that when you put it in that bin, your job is done and it is now going to be sorted out. However, no one really can tell what recycling really means. Where is that going? Through the blockchain system, you will know, because we're going to be able to show you, taking the example of the boats, that this respective bottle was collected from these coordinates in this river or this ocean or this state. It was then transferred and moved to this facility and location for recycling, shredding, and was then repurposed to creating a brick in this facility. And then 6 months after is now a brick that is a part of this library in Tanzania. So you're going to see it through and through. So, you're going to actually know true circularity in its true sense of traceability and transparency. And that's why we're focused on a Web3 based solution.
I said this in the beginning of the discussion that this is a global movement to find a common solution to plastic waste. I want to understand how is Oceans and Us encouraging people to do their bit in their limited capacities and make a difference?
There are a lot of companies and a lot of governments who are making milestone pledges and milestone initiatives towards a change with whether it's a carbon neutrality or a net zero initiative, or whether it's something to innovate towards a new product. But at the end of the day, I think it's the people on the ground. It's the community. It's you and I who have to make a slight difference to be able to contribute towards this, because all of that is centered around the consumer. And we are the consumers. While we put the responsibility on the people to recycle more consciously or consume more consciously, for example, when I watch Seaspiracy or when anybody watches one of these documentaries, it usually stays with you for about 7 days or 10 days or a month at max, after which convenience sort of overtakes any kind of drive or motivation. And we didn't want to create a New Year's resolution. We didn't want people to come and say, I'm going to live more plastic conscious, for a month and then forget all about it because of lack of convenience.
Yeah.
So we have also developed something called a smart bin, which we will be deploying our pilot in Dubai later this month. And these bins are going to be deployed in all the common areas, whether it's a mall or a park or a commercial area or your office or community area per se. And what this does is whatever you dispose as a piece of plastic, it rewards you. So incentivization, I think, is the missing piece to ensure sustained motivation. So every time you put a piece of plastic, you will get a reward. And these rewards are twofold in our ecosystem. One, you can go in and cash this reward directly and get a free cup of Starbucks coffee someday after a certain amount of plastic has been disposed. Or you could use these reward points to purchase Oceans and Us tokens and have a piece of ownership in the company. So in a way, it depends on who you are. We simplify it. We've taken it a step further where somebody doesn't necessarily understand the tokenomics or Web3 in general and is a very common day-to-day person like my mom, for example. And if she takes an extra 30 seconds to segregate her shampoo bottles and her plastic bottles separately, that again goes onto the blockchain, and then she gets rewarded in discounts. So we want to make sure the company that recycles and recreates material isn't the only one who's monetizing, because when you buy a bottle of shampoo, for example, you're not paying only for the ingredient, you paid for all of it. Paid for the bottle, the labeling, the packaging, all of it. So if I take that and I make a brick out of it and I monetize the brick, why shouldn't you get a kickback? So we want to make sure that everybody has a shared revenue ecosystem. So it's a continued effort collectively.
There are new and interesting alternatives to plastic that I have come across personally that we can see around us almost every day. For example, people want to get rid of plastic straws, so now they're making straws out of coconut leaves. Or someone understands that plastic flip-flops or slippers are adding to marine pollution, so they want to make footwear or flip-flops out of algae. So there are a lot of these sustainable alternatives to plastic. But again, it'll take a long time for these alternatives to become as cheap, accessible, and convenient as plastic. How do you think we can tackle plastic pollution and production and plastic consumption also, while still meeting the demands of a growing global population?
So see, again, for me, I feel like there are all these alternatives that are coming, and that is inevitably is to go to the root of the problem, which is, how things are manufactured. And yes, there are a lot of, plastic made or recycled plastic made sneakers or hoodies or straws, etc. And in my opinion, true circularity isn't fixing one circle. For example, let's say if you buy a pair of sneakers that are made from ocean-bound plastic, if you read the fine print, it's anywhere between 7 to 20% at best. That is the actual recycled plastic. Even if it were 100%, and let's say a brand is doing it in a legitimate manner, you, after 6, 12, 18, 24 months, will get bored of that sneaker, or it will wear out, after which you are going to dispose it. So that might inevitably come back to the landfill. So all you've actually done is delayed the process of the same plastic coming back into the ecosystem in a different shape and form. So I don't think it necessarily solves any problem. It just delays the problem. So what we want to do, which is why again it's the blockchain, is when this happens, we want to make sure it remains in the ecosystem. So let's say you buy these pair of sneakers, we will come and collect it from you when you're done, whether it's worn out or whether it's just something that you want to upgrade, like a phone. Apple cars, they already have this system where you can trade in your existing car, trade in your existing phone. And we want to do this for multiple products, and then you get a discount on the next one that you buy. And every product is recyclable only to a certain degree. So after which we will have a more permanent solution for it, which is something like a brick, which will remain longer. Or we're looking into pyrolysis, where plastic will be used to create fuel, fuel that is got carbon neutrality to associated with it. And this fuel can be used to power perhaps our boats, or perhaps a local plant for recycling, etc. So we're looking at ensuring that something remains within this ecosystem. We want to be able to bring this ecosystem together, which now develops new material while we're fixing the way of ensuring the existing material is also repurposed.
Joel, let's talk about recycling. For years,
Mhm.
one common solution to combating plastic waste has been recycling, but latest reports
Yeah,
suggest that recycling is not the best solution, as it often
yeah.
ends up being exported to developing countries, or it leads to the spread of microplastics back into the environment. What are your thoughts
Mhm.
on recycling? And do you think there are any better alternatives or approaches that we can explore?
Absolutely. See, recycling for the longest period was communicated as the final step.
Yes.
Recycling something was the final step of the problem as the solution. Unfortunately, no one really defined recycling. And if you ask a lot of people, no one will be able to say what it actually means. Does it mean that you shred it? Does it mean that you burn it? Does it mean that you put it in the landfill? What does it actually mean? Or does it just mean that it's going to be collected? There's no way of actually defining it. I feel there are two major steps that are required after that, which we are focused on, which is reuse and repurpose. I truly believe that the current model where you have to pay somebody to come and take your waste is going to change. Plastic will no longer be termed as a waste, but a resource and an actual commodity. And you will get paid to give you a piece of plastic. And when that happens, you will see recycling scale at a larger business revenue line. And that, in my opinion, is the way to see it truly sustainable.
Joel, you talked about making this entire ecosystem profitable. Do you think sustainability and profit go hand in hand? How is Oceans and Us creating a profitable ecosystem?
I think 100%. I think it's unfortunate that sustainability falls under the CSR department in most organizations, even today, when it's completely two very different things. And I think, it's not an afterthought anymore. It's one of the largest crises today in the world. It's no longer something that we need to leave for the future generations. And I truly think that people actually emotionally connect with something only if it's the immediate next generation. It's when you see your kids are going to suffer, not a random hypothetical future generation. And we're there. We're at a point where it's now going to impact the very next generation. And I truly think this is one of the greatest opportunities that we have to come and collaboratively solve a global problem as humanity. And this is far beyond race, religion, geography, culture, completely. We just come together as people. And it's the greatest opportunity that we've had as entrepreneurs or as people to solve a problem. So to be able to, again, make sure that this happens in a way where it's not an afterthought, where it's not something that you want to do randomly on a weekend once a month, but it's something that is as effortless as blinking. Is just something that is a lifestyle change and an adaptation. You need to make sure you're incentivized. I always say that, it's a lot easier if someone decides to go to the gym to get fit or lose weight if they were paid to do it rather than paying to do it.
Yeah.
So in a similar way, We want to make sure that everybody who participates in this gets incentivized and rewarded. And in doing so, we spent a lot of time trying to understand how can we do this, ensuring it's profitable. Multiple avenues that we figured out. Like I said, the boats would work as a project investment in itself. So if you look at a company today like an Amazon, etc., who are investing heavily into tree plantation to reach their carbon offset goals, they can do that by sponsoring a boat instead for a given year, rather than a bunch of random trees somewhere that they have no clue about. But this boat is going to be visible. It is going to be in the oceans. It's going to be constantly traced and tracked. And they, at the end of the day, end of the year, will be able to say in their ESG reporting that they have removed 150,000 tons, for example, of plastics in the year 2023, and that is equal to XYZ in terms of an offset, in terms of recycling, in terms of environmental impact. So things like this as a project investment. People even get to invest in the bins. So you could essentially own 6 or 7 bins as you would, let's say, own a shared cab riding service, or own or rent a store. And in a similar capacity, you would share in the revenue of the products of these bins. So for example, the bins have an inbuilt shredder and will shred the plastics. So these plastic shreds have monetary value to it. The recycling of this has a plastic credit associated with it. So the revenues from that will go back to the person who's invested in these bins. In addition to that, we're doing something that I find very exciting, which is a 365-day NFT. And this is basically one NFT for the year. So when's your birthday, if you don't mind me asking, Navya?
7th of November.
Great. So let's say you want to own November 7th, the NFT of November 7th. So you would bid for that one and own it. And the cost of that NFT would be directly associated with the cost for the cleanup on that given day.
Okay.
And on a similar, on the reverse angle or the flip side of it, a unique artist will bid for the November 7th a piece of artwork, and we will have a revenue share deal with them. But in this capacity, you buy into our ecosystem of the tokens, and the value of these NFTs will go up because we're going to do it only for 365 days. They have several unlockables associated with it, whether it's directly linked to our tokens or linked to our events annually, etc. So we've spent a considerable amount of time trying to make sure this is a profitable venture, not just because we want to make money, but because we want everybody to make money. And I truly think profitability from good and for good is a lot better than just CSR.
There are a lot of myths and fears associated with plastic. As I said, there is a new study and a new report coming out every day that scares people. What is your message to people who are watching this interaction and who are worried about how plastic can impact them in the coming years? What is it that they can do to live a more eco-conscious lifestyle?
Like you rightly said, there is a lot of data, and unfortunately, all the information that's out there is scary, to say the least. I always say that even the documentaries and all the statistics that we see and come across is something that you wouldn't want to show a 5-year-old. So unless you can show the next generation, you can't get them to inculcate a certain change in their life today as a way of living, rather than having them adapt to a certain lifestyle when they're adults. And that's why we're facing a challenge today. We can start very small. We can start very small when we either when we buy a piece of product or we dispose a piece of product. We just need to think where it will end up. And if we don't have an idea, maybe we should try and find out. And there are a lot of companies who make sure that your product will not end up like a straw in the nostril of a turtle, or will not end up inside the stomach of a whale. And there are companies doing this, but we need to know about it. The solutions are there. The intent and the initiative is there. We just need to be a little more aware.
Absolutely. I think the right sort of awareness and understanding that plastic is not really the end of everything, rather a great opportunity for everyone to come along and solve it, as you said, can be really helpful. And I'd like to say that what Oceans and Us is doing is truly remarkable. And I do agree when you say that plastic is a brilliant resource and it just needs to be handled in a much better way. And I'd like to thank you for taking our time and speaking to me. And News with Navya will continue to talk about plastic every Tuesday at 8 p.m.
For everybody listening, I think this is a great show. Thank you.